Okay, well, good morning and welcome to Norfolk and Suffolk's Local Industrial Decarbonisation Plans Collaboration Session. That's a bit of a mouthful. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lisa Roberts, Head of Strategy at New Anglia LEP. I just want to thank you all for taking the time to join us today to hear about what I think is a great opportunity. The Department for Energy Security Net Zero Local Industrial Decarbonisation Plan competition, which is due to be launched in early June. I'd like to thank our colleagues from Innovate UK, KTN, who are supporting this session today. And I will be shortly handing over to Emma McKenna, who will be providing an overview and the scope of the competition. Before I do that, I want to share with you the plan for the session. As there is hopefully over 40 people on this call, I'm not going to ask everybody to introduce themselves just yet. You'll have that opportunity when we go into the breakout rooms a little bit later on. But there is one person that I would like to introduce you all to, and that's Nicolette Jeffries, who some of you may already know as the LEP's guru on CRM system. But I'm very pleased to say that Nicolette has been appointed as the New Anglia Clean Growth Manager and will be starting on the 5th of June. I don't know whether Nicolette is able to wave her hand so you can see who she is.
Hi everybody, nice to meet you. I don't know if you can see me, I can only see you, Lisa, but...
Fantastic. Well, hopefully you popped up on screen. If not, I'm sure many of you will get to know Nicolette very well if you don't already know her. Okay, so the aim of today's session is to share some details on the competition, identify interested partners who would like to collaborate and develop a local industrial decarbonisation plan across Norfolk and Suffolk, and for us to really start thinking about the local opportunities for decarbonisation planning, with the emphasis on collaborative solutions such as shared technologies and infrastructure. So the agenda for today is, as I mentioned, I'll be handing over to Emma shortly to provide the programme overview and scope of the competition. There will be a Q&A at the end of this session. Can I ask you to use the chat to pose your questions as we go along? We will then read as many as we can and answer as many as we can at the end. Any questions that we don't get through today, we will provide as part of the follow-up to the session. So around 10:55, I'll be providing a short overview of the local context and set out our proposed approach to the competition. There will be about 30 minutes at the end of the session where we will transfer you, fingers crossed, into breakout rooms for discussion. There are 4 questions to discuss, more on that in a little while. The session will end in your breakout groups where more information on next steps will be shared. As I mentioned earlier, the presentation is being recorded so we can share it with those who are unable to attend today but are very keen to engage. So please can I ask you to remain on mute during the presentation. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to you, Emma, now. So please don't forget to post those questions in the chat bar.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much, Lisa. Yeah, as Lisa said, I'm Emma McKenna. I'm head of Net Zero Innovate UK KTN. I'm just going to give a real brief overview of this particular programme this morning. If you're okay to stop sharing, Lisa, I think Chris is going to share the slides from our end, if that's okay. Yeah, great, perfect. So I'm just going to run through kind of just a bit of an overview of the programme in terms of kind of what it is, how it came about, and a little bit of details around that. As Lisa said, if you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat box. I'll try and either address them as I go through or address them at the end. We've been supporting the UKRI team that lead on industrial decarbonisation and the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero by hosting their kind of engagement workshops and events that they've been running now for the last number of weeks to really try and promote exactly what this program is and reach out and communicate that with the intended audience for this particular program. So this local industrial decarbonisation programme has come about through a number of different government commitments that we've seen over the last number of years through different strategies and white papers and policy documents. And a big piece of that was really around how do we address the role of dispersed sites and the role that they have to play in contributing towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions across industry and across the UK. Because dispersed sites account for about half of UK industrial emissions, and they do play such a critical role in sector decarbonisation. We've seen already there's been significant investment that's went into those kind of main clusters around the UK, but very little funding for dispersed sites to actually come together and work together in a collaborative way to really figure out, how do we take a place-based approach to developing decarbonisation plans and roadmaps for this journey towards net zero. And that commitment, as we can see here, is government's commitment to include funding for those mini clusters in the early 2020s. And that's why we're seeing this programme now come online and be live in 2023. Chris, can you click on, please? Thank you. So the competition itself was announced in February. And as I've mentioned, we've been running a number of different events from mid-April. And these will continue right through onto the briefing event that's going to be hosted on the 6th of June. The programme itself is a £5 million programme pot, and it's really to support the development of those strategic decarbonisation plans for industrial manufacturers located in dispersed sites to really kickstart their journey towards a low carbon future. So it's not about individual organisations and developing plans for them, but it's about a whole site and clusters coming together to work together. And it's for, open to collaborative cluster project teams to be formed off, those emitters, those industrial manufacturers and other key stakeholders that can help corral and bring people together to develop those plans. And there is expert advisors that are able to support engagement and cluster development. So these are technical advisors that have worked in the previous industrial decarbonisation programme, that have been part of those clusters, that have been part of those plans to develop and decarbonise the main clusters. They've joined us at a number of the events we've had so far, and there is a booking form for clusters that have an interest in applying for this fund to engage with them. You can engage with them in that kind of pre-competition phase. So right now, up until when the competition goes live, and I think we've shared, I think Lisa has the details on how to book a session. And then those expert advisors will be available once applicants have been awarded and those projects have commenced to actually help and support with the development of those plans and during kind of project delivery as well. Next slide, please, Chris. So as an overview in terms of kind of what the competition will actually provide support for, it's very much about the development of credible, context sensitive, and I think that's really, really important. Each cluster, each dispersed site will certainly have its own kind of industrial DNA, its own net zero challenges and innovation opportunities, its own specific barriers, enablers, and also its own kind of strategic priorities as well. And existing activity that's already going on. So it needs to be, it's very much kind of sensitive to that kind of local context. So it's about developing those strategic plans for decarbonising those local clusters, not located within the UK's existing industrial clusters, to develop plans to reduce their emissions and to avoid carbon leakage. And I don't think there's any concerns about this particular area potentially maybe kind of overlapping with an existing cluster. But that's something that's really important across the board, is that it can't have any sort of geographical overlap with any of the existing clusters that have already been funded. It's very much about increasing that organisational collaboration between closely located businesses, particularly industrial businesses and other stakeholders, to really strengthen decarbonisation planning skills, the capacity and the capability as well within those local clusters, and to provide evidence gathering to inform the decarbonisation of those clusters and dispersed sites. So, being evidence-based and being evidence-driven within kind of the plans and the actions that would be taken as part of that. Next slide, please, Chris. So what would a successful local cluster look like? So the cluster should be able to demonstrate cooperation between businesses and organisations across that particular region. evidence joint decision making for the benefit of the wider cluster. So I think that's really, really important. So it's about everyone that's involved in that, whether it's the larger emitters or the smaller SMEs. It's about, you know, being able to evidence that kind of benefit for the wider cluster. It should also consider wider societal benefits of the activity. Obviously, a huge drive for this is obviously around decarbonisation and developing a plan for how you can reduce greenhouse gas emissions across this cluster. But it's really important that wider societal benefits are also considered, and that's something that's growing in, you know, importance as well on this agenda around, you know, net zero and supporting innovation and supporting industry. So, for example, the importance of public benefit from local decarbonisation, and also that alignment with public funding and also local priorities as well. Cluster should have membership that represents industries within their geographies and not just a small subset. So it's very much kind of driving that cross-sector approach within localized areas. Engage with relevant public sector organizations and have support from communities in which they operate within. And I think that's very much kind of drawn across kind of the opportunities where there might be existing localized kind of strategies around net zero and around decarbonisation. How does it align with that? How is it building on local strategic priorities, and how does it also benefit in the local communities in which it coexists with? The cluster should realise the wider benefits that decarbonisation can bring for the region, going beyond individual projects, and for example, to maximise emissions reductions potential and the development of supply chain and jobs as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is not an exhaustive list, but this is just what UKRI and DESNZ are anticipating the plans would include. So things like technology options, emissions data, commercial arrangements. Of course, this particular program is about organizations coming together to work together. So being mindful of kind of how that collaboration would work and be facilitated, different stakeholders, funding and finance, knowledge dissemination. So how is that going to be shared? How is that going to be exchanged around knowledge transfer and innovation? The impact of decarbonisation in the local cluster, both economic, social, and environmental. It's important to think of all three aspects of that. Building on the existing decarbonisation activities. So what's there and what needs to happen, the current barriers and enablers that is kind of felt and seen by local organizations, local industrial manufacturers are part of that. Really clear overview of kind of what the geographic coverage is, and also the timelines. So what's the key milestones for what's going to be achieved and when, you know, and I think that's really, really important in terms of, you know, sometimes when we're thinking about a 2050 target, for example, we lose a sense of urgency there, but it's not enough just to do something, you know, kind of a few years out from that target. It's about what we're doing right now, what the timeline is for that, what's going to be achieved, and what action is going to be taken. So be really mindful of that, and including those timelines in. So the overview of the competition. So in terms of eligibility and scope, this is subject to change. So as part of the workshops that we've been hosting with UKRI and DESNZ, has been very much about providing organisations across the UK, much like people that are here today, but others that are based right across, to really get feedback on the eligibility, get feedback on the scope. We've been running a survey as well alongside those workshops to be able to kind of collate all of that information. And so that eligibility and scope will be finalised and will be shared both when the competition goes online on the 5th of June, but also as well as part of the briefing workshop. So I think it's, you know, we're pretty much there with it, but it is just to kind of be mindful that there is potentially elements of this that are subject to change ahead of the competition going live. So we can kind of share a sense of what it may look like right now, and then it'll be finalized in the next fortnight. So in terms of the programme itself, it is a £5 million purse. The total grant available for each individual project could be anything from 75,000 up to 800,000. The projects need to start no later than January 2024, and the projects need to end by the 31st of December 2024. So there is a window there of up to about 12 months for projects to be delivered. In terms of being able to be a project lead, you must be a UK registered business of any size. You could be a research organisation, a public sector organisation, perhaps a charity or a not-for-profit. You must carry out the project work in the UK. and you must intend to exploit the results from or in the UK and collaborate with other UK registered organisations as well. In terms of the project team, all of those that have been listed above that could be project leads can also be part of that, but you can also be an academic institution. And again, the project work must be carried out in the UK. So most organisations can lead, with the exception of an academic institution, but they can be part of the project team. Subcontractors would be allowed, but they must be from the UK, and the cost must be justified and appropriate to the total eligible project costs. And that's pretty standard across most kind of public funding grant competitions anyway. Collaboration will be required. So collaboration with other organisations is required, and they do not accept applications for single industrial facilities. So it's being really mindful of that in terms of the development of an application. Those collaboration agreements will be required. So thinking about that in terms of kind of who you want in the project team will, of course, I think potentially have an impact on kind of the number of organisations that are involved in the project team when you think about kind of the collaboration agreements that would need to be put in place ahead of delivery. Next slide, please, Chris. So the project duration is a minimum of 6 months. And in terms of application, so a business, research, or an RTO, a charity or not-for-profit or public sector organisation can lead on one application, but they can be included as a collaborator in a further 2 applications. If an organisation is not leading an application, it can collaborate in up to 2 applications. There is some considerations here around previous Innovate UK projects. So you have been involved in a previous one. You will not be able to receive funding if you fail to exploit a previously funded project, you've got an overdue IAR, so an independent accountant's report, or you fail to comply with the grant terms and conditions in some way. So it is being really mindful of that, both for yourself, but potentially for project partners in the delivery of this the project. And then subsidy control and state aid where applicable. The funding will be awarded in line with the Subsidy Control Act 2022. And we're unable to advise on individual eligibility or legal obligations. That's something that you should be familiar with yourself. There is some information that is available online, but yeah, that's a new Subsidy Control Act that's come out now in 2022, and that's the one that organisations should and projects should be compliant with as well. In terms of scope, again, as I said, this is kind of, there's potential for a little bit of subject to change, but at a very high level, the proposal needs to develop a strong understanding of emissions data and developing pathways to reach net zero by 2050. So that's really, really important. It has to be that kind of, it has to be data driven. It's about demonstrating what networks and stakeholders and audiences will contribute to the project and what information will be disseminated. So who all needs to be involved as part of this cluster. Demonstrating the regional and the national significance of the project itself. So how does it sit into the wider context? And how does it capture existing activity within the cluster on industrial decarbonisation, and then the option to build on that. Identify key industrial decarbonisation project options. It's common infrastructure or site specific that's required to achieve carbon abatement in the cluster. Next slide, please. It also should work to identify the barriers and enablers to industrial decarbonisation within the cluster, analyse what the decarbonisation benefits and costs are across all of those areas of emissions, economic, environmental, and societal. Again, identifying the key stakeholders and the plans for further engagement and further and future development of organisational structures designed to implement the content of that plan. So, and then consider the wider cross-economy decarbonisation scenarios. And then just the last point on this one is demonstrating how the project will lead to decarbonisation of local industrial cluster after from the funding competition ends in March 2025, to identify the funding to be made available by each organisation and on what time frame. At present, this is a standalone competition, so there can't be any reliance on any potential funding. So it is thinking about kind of essentially what's available locally, or what local organisations potentially could invest post this particular programme and these plans being developed. In terms of what the projects will not fund, it's single industrial facilities, pre-feed or feed studies, It's felt that the projects or the sites or clusters at this stage would not be as mature to be able to be looking at that particular aspect. So it will not fund that area just yet. The projects are not primarily focused on the industrial decarbonisation, so that's really important. And then, of course, projects that are considered to duplicate areas covered by the existing clusters. If you're unfamiliar with where those clusters are at, I don't know if we've got a picture of them in this slide, but they're certainly available online, and we can absolutely share that with Lisa anyway as well. There's some exceptions, plans that are primarily focused on industry, but which can show synergies with decarbonisation of other sectors will be accepted. And plans that do not duplicate area covered of IDC clusters, but it could show how their plans will connect to those cluster plans will be accepted. I think there might be another slide. Yeah, sorry, it is included. So yeah, these are where the existing IDC supported clusters and projects are. I don't really feel that any of them essentially would overlap with this particular geographic region, but it is just be mindful of kind of where they're at and what their focus areas are. If you're interested in finding out about any of these particular projects, just, you know, for your own interest, each project has its own project website, and they've shared plans in terms of kind of their approach, how they've done it, what their plans look like. And it's really quite interesting. We've had a number of different organizations that have participated in these plans. They formed some of those technical advisors I mentioned earlier. And so they're a really strong resource in being able to kind of share their own experience. And we've had, you know, it's some of the previous workshops, I'm not sure if anyone's been able to attend the UK-wide ones. We've had people there from SPIC, so in South Wales, and we've also had Matthew Rhodes in the Black Country, talking about kind of, working across dispersed clusters and bringing those together within that particular region, and the learnings and insights from that. So I really would encourage you to engage with those technical advisors at this stage, pre the competition opening, but also checking out kind of what they've done, their approach, and perhaps even listening in. All the recordings are available from those workshops, so you can listen in and hear those presentations as well. Next slide, Chris. In terms of the guidance and support, as I've mentioned, there's access to those technical experts, and they're able to provide guidance in some of these various different areas around cost estimates, process engineering, business models, and so on. And as I said, they can do that in this kind of pre-competition engagement phase and during project delivery, but they're not available during the competition window, which is from the early June to early August. So we would recommend reaching out and engaging with them now, and then they will be available if successful during project delivery. They're not there to write your application, and they're not there to deliver your project, but they are really a great source of insight, and they can help with any of the list of things that are available there. So definitely recommend engaging, and we can share the details on how you can do that as well. Next one, Chris. And the indicative timeline. So we've got some dates now in with this one. So the competition will launch on the 5th of June. The briefing event is on the 6th of June, and it will close in early August. The applicants will be notified in October, and then the projects will need to start no later than January 2024. And I think that provides a bit of an overview. I don't think there's any other slides we're going to cover now, but I think that's an overview just of the program and kind of what you can expect in terms of what is expected as well. I think that covers it. I think we can stop sharing now, Chris. So I don't know if anyone does have any specific questions they wanted us to touch on. One of the other things as well is we do have an FAQ document that we've been building over the last number of weeks at the different workshops and the initial kind of launch of the competition, which provides information about some questions that we think that we know have been coming up time and time again, so we can also share that as well with everyone so they can refer to that too. Okay, we got some questions coming through. Lisa, do you want me to just kind of run through these? And okay, no problem. Chris and Phoebe, if you know the answers as well, obviously shout out. So I'm joined, by two colleagues from KTN as well this morning. I'll just read these out while I process it, if that's okay. So you'll just have to listen to me read out loud, and then we'll just kind of work through them. And acknowledging the need to be context sensitive, how do you expect anticipate managing the needs and requirements of specific dispersed sites when clustering them together to form a local partnership.
I'm going to pick that one up, Emma.
Yeah. Sorry, that one. Yeah.
I think it's a very good question, and I think that's something that we would look to discuss with the partners in that area. I think one of the key things we're very keen to look at doing is looking at those opportunities where there is opportunity to share around technology and investment, possibly around innovation in power and energy generation, heat distribution, whatever it might be. We're keen to look at those partnership opportunities, understanding that there will be commercial sensitivities around some of these areas. So that is absolutely something we would be looking to work with those partners.
Thanks so much, Lisa. In terms of clarifying membership within geographies, when we say geographies, how is that defined and quantified? That's entirely up to you. The UKRI and DESNAV team have not defined what scale a geographical region could be. It's kind of what makes sense to you in terms of kind of what scale you think would operate at the right level. So that's not something that's being predefined or predetermined, and that's absolutely cluster specific and region specific. So there is no kind of expectations around that. The one thing is it cannot be a single industrial facility. We know that it needs to be at a much bigger scale than that. So yeah, there's no kind of predetermination or predefinement around that particular one. So hopefully that answers that. But if you've got any follow-on questions, do pop it in. Chris, I can see, has added in the initial briefing recording. So yeah, feel free to check that out. And I think it's in that one that we've got the really lengthy presentation from Matthew Rhodes as well, from the Black Country, which is really, really insightful and detailed. The funding is to develop and execute the plans, deliver and not just plan them. No, the funding is available to develop the plans. It's not for implementation. So it is to develop those plans. Is the funding for manufacturing industries only, or are service industries included? So it's there's some kind of specifics. I think industrial manufacturing and industrial organizations is where this is particularly focused on, and that's where the focus of the competition is at. So just to kind of think about that, when we think about UK manufacturing industries, that can range from metals, minerals, chemicals, food, drink, paper, pulp, ceramics, glass, oil refineries, and less energy intensive manufacturing, combining high-end technology and high-skilled workers to make products that are traded all over the world. So those are the sorts of things that are being considered. And so it's those types of industrial sectors that are being considered for this particular competition in this particular program.
Emma, can I just come in on that one? Because I've been speaking to Matthew Rhodes, who's one of the technical advisors, who if you watch the video that's in the briefing recording link, Matthew does a fantastic presentation setting out what they've done, and that was one of the questions that I tested with him. And obviously within a cluster area, there will be other organisations and businesses outside that kind of core manufacturing kind of profile. So it's natural that if you're looking at any energy solutions or whatever it might be for a cluster, that there will be opportunities to go beyond that. But I am very aware that what Emma says, that the primary focus is on manufacturing, but there is opportunity within the wider work.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, that's great. Just the last question we've got there is, give an example of a single industrial facility which would not work. So that would be like a single factory, essentially, something like that, kind of one single organization operating on its own. And it would need to be a collaboration of organizations and industrial organizations coming together, essentially. So it couldn't be just one single factory. Or just sorry, just reading through the questions, I'm pausing and going quiet. That's why. Be involved in our research, among other things, that find that large firms are much more further down the road to net zero than SMEs. Is one of the objectives is a competition to disseminate practice from large firms to SMEs. Yeah, potentially. That could certainly be within scope. It is about bringing together those kind of larger emitters along with kind of SMEs, potentially ones that are co-located or ones that kind of form that supply chain. So definitely disseminating insight, knowledge transfer across that as well. So yeah. A primary focus on manufacturing, industrial energy demand, but with the opportunity to incorporate other local energy and decarbonize, correct or not? Yeah, the main focus is obviously around industrial decarbonization, but it's important to kind of set that in the context potentially of other strategic priorities for that particular region. So one of the things that I know that we've looked at with other clusters we've been speaking to is about kind of understand what those other strategic priorities are, existing activity, and how it can kind of build on that and how that can be incorporated, and also thinking as well about the local community in which the potential of these industrial organizations are co-located with, and the wider benefits that potentially any work that you're doing could bring. So I'm just going to read the next question. Take a pause. Does everyone want me to read them out, or is everyone reading them in the chat and can see them as well? Because I don't know if people are just sick of hearing me talk at this point. But yeah, if you don't want to, apologies. Okay, I don't think that's a question actually, is it? That's just a comment from Peter. Yeah, carbon abatement, carbon reduction is kind of the main focus on this particular one. But I think in terms of sequestration, I don't know if that's really come up as a question before, Chris or Phoebe, that's been addressed. So we can take that away and just absolutely double check on that one. But it's mostly around carbon reduction. But I think maybe potentially some of them have thought about that. So if we can, we'll copy and paste that particular one, Anna, and double check the answer and come back to you. We can share it via Lisa if that's okay. Is there any other questions that anyone has you'd like us to address now? If nothing's coming to mind now, but something comes up a little bit later, when we're in the breakout rooms or having discussions, then definitely let us know. I think myself, Chris, and Phoebe are split across the 3 rooms. But if a question comes up and we're not in the room and we're not able to answer, then just share it with whoever the facilitator or scribe is in that room, and they can share it back with us, and we can make sure that we disseminate the answer to that and any of the others that we haven't been able to give a clear answer to today.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Emma, Chris and Phoebe, for that. As Emma's just mentioned, if you have any further questions, please either put them in the chat as we go through, or raise them in your breakout sessions, which we're just about to go into. We are a little bit ahead of time, which is always great. So we may manage to get through the meeting quicker than expected. I'm going to spend the next 10 to 15 minutes providing some local context and sharing with you our proposed approach to competition. As highlighted in the economic strategy, Norfolk and Suffolk strengths and assets make it well placed to be at the forefront of the green industrial revolution. As a UK leading producer of renewable and low carbon energy and a significant producer of low carbon goods and services, a testbed for innovation in industries such as farming and food production, transportation, construction, which need to reduce their carbon footprint and adapt to changing climate. It's an area of outstanding natural environment, natural resources, which are particularly vulnerable to climate change, but where innovative new mitigating measures and technologies are being pioneered. It's also an area with wealth of world-class innovation and thinking and exportable skills, along with many award-winning businesses that are at the leading edge of net zero carbon futures. There are many past and present projects that this opportunity can and should build on, and I'm going to talk about 3 in particular. The UEA's Climate Change Adaptation and Carbon Reduction Scoping Reports, Road to Net Zero programme and the Norfolk Agri-Food Industrial Decarbonisation Pilot Project. We're also keen to hear from you in the breakout sessions where you will be asked to highlight any other projects that this opportunity should build on or align with. Okay, so back in 2019, the LEP commissioned UEA to produce an evidence base and a scoping report which sets out recommendations to inform the development of a climate change adaptation and carbon reduction action plan. I wanted to share with you one particular map, which is on screen now. It shows the major point source emitters across Norfolk and Suffolk, such as power stations, food processing plants. Overall, the 37 point sources account for 22.6% of the total CO2 emissions in Norfolk and Suffolk, and this was during 2016. It's a little out of date, but we are working to update this map, but at least it gives you a good illustration of the dispersed nature of the emissions. The report also identified some local priorities for action planning, which I'd like to highlight. Three in particular. So the agri sector, where it states improving water management needs to be a priority for coming decades, both in terms of increasing storage capacity and greater use efficiency. Opportunities will exist for landowners and managers to contribute to carbon sequestration and the development of enterprise based on new crops to meet demands for local renewable generation and of heat and power. The food processing sector, where it states several processing plants make a substantial contribution to the region's greenhouse gas emissions, and options to reduce the carbon footprint should be investigated. And the last one I wanted to pull out was around the energy sector. As we all know, the region is already a leading generator of renewable energy, and in the coming decades, we will see this the demand for this grow around electricity. At present, and many of you will know, there are some constraints on the capacity of electricity transmission and the distribution network in many parts of Norfolk and Suffolk. And in developing an investment strategy to rectify this situation is fundamental to both meeting decarbonisation objectives as well as supporting future economic growth. And then the third project or programme is the Road to Net Zero, which is a community renewal fund project, and it's a great example of collaboration, regional collaboration. One of the work strands of this project was led by University of East Anglia in partnership with the University of Suffolk, who mapped sectoral opportunities on the net zero journey by defining businesses' wants and needs and informing understanding of decarbonisation constraints and opportunities. There were three key findings to this work strand. The report identified a net zero information and knowledge deficit, which poses a significant barrier to decarbonisation action. Strategic and embedded planning of the net zero, particularly amongst SMEs, require urgent support and development. Strategic planning progress is required across the SME population. And greater regional cohesion with respect to net zero agenda. This is particularly important for hard to reach companies. The most current project I want to mention is the Norfolk Agri-Food Industrial Decarbonisation Project. So in anticipation of the government's plan to support activity around industrial decarbonisation on dispersed clusters and the opportunity that was presented by Norfolk Investment Fund, the LEP, with the support of UEA, Innovate UK, KTN, British Sugar, Norfolk Climate Change Partnership, FSB, and the Norfolk Chambers of Commerce, submitted a proposal to pilot some work which would provide a foundation for a much larger scale project on industrial decarbonisation. So this project started in April, so it's very early days, of which Nikki will be leading this work, and it's due to conclude in March 2024. It will build on the Road to Net Zero business support programme by developing a Norfolk-wide industry-led roadmap, establishing how we support agri-food and land management to decarbonise by capitalising on our local strengths, clean energy, ICT, digital, and as well as the broader supporting economic pillars of innovation, skills, business support and infrastructure. Opportunities will be taken to diffuse innovation and knowledge across the economy. It will also look to use knowledge from large industry emitters across Norfolk to support SME peer-to-peer learning in the agri-food sector and beyond. This work will provide fantastic building blocks as a much larger industrial decarbonisation planning across Norfolk and Suffolk. Okay, so our approach. We are keen to develop a collaborative bid. We're also happy to support as many bids as we can in the area. If we can get as much funds into Norfolk and Suffolk, I would say that's a big win for us. We all share ambitions around decarbonising our economy across Norfolk and Suffolk. And this is our call to action. We are looking to identify partners to collaborate with. And I think there are two different types of partners that we're looking for. Delivery partners, for those who will be able to work with us on a day-to-day basis to deliver each element of the work, which will include, but not a definitive list, updating and enhancing the evidence and data, which will be a critical part of developing the plan. Developing or the development of a roadmap for dispersed industry clusters, which demonstrates how they might become net zero. Deliver a range of knowledge and innovation diffusion activities. Identify and develop financial mechanisms which will support businesses to decarbonise. Identify the possible locations, both the current and the future net zero and circular economy clusters, and work with those businesses and the organisations within those locations to develop decarbonisation master plans. So going into those businesses, looking at what's needed, hopefully we can identify some engineers that we can work with that's able to kind of provide that technical input and advice. And we will use the data to help identify a number of clusters that we will work with. And obviously we want to identify shared infrastructure and energy solutions. So these are some of the elements which we believe should be part of our approach. Obviously we're keen to hear from you guys. I mentioned two different types of partners. I think the second type of partners are, I'm terming them network partners, and these are the partners that could provide input to shape and influence the work, as well as share information to the wider network and industry. So, for example, helping to identify, join up on wider initiatives. One of the things I'm really keen on doing is looking, for example, how we might use our Skills Bootcamp programme to develop the right courses that are required to support the industrial decarbonisation and help the workforce reskill and upskill in that area. Another thing would be to identify wider environmental, social and governance impacts. So we are also will be looking to update these partners on a regular basis. Okay, so you'll be pleased to hear this is my last slide. Hopefully you found today's presentation really helpful, and we are keen to hear from you. So shortly, hopefully, if the technology works, you will be transferred into your breakout groups. In each group, you will have a facilitator and someone taking the key points of the discussion. The questions on screen are the questions that we will be discussing, and there'll be 30 minutes to have a chat about these questions, after which the facilitator will provide you with an outline of next steps and close the sessions. So as you will not be returning to the main screen, I just want to take the opportunity to thank you all for your time, and hopefully for your amazing input into the discussion that we're just about to go into. I hope that we will be able to identify and do what I believe we do best in Norfolk and Suffolk, and that's collaborate to secure as much as well, more than our fair share of funds to support businesses, and in this case on their journey to decarbonisation of our economy.